Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to join you. So a key question we all, I'm sure, have the right answer to is: do we want to live our lives consciously or unconsciously? Right? Do we want to lead consciously or unconsciously? Do we want to do business consciously or unconsciously? So clearly, the answer is we need greater consciousness uh, in all aspects of human enterprise and life. And I'm going to try to convey that message and summarize what is really several decades of experience in R&D and innovation environments, product development, product management, leading to global P&L responsibility for business units, driving digital innovation, and as you know, along the way, co-founding and participating in the MIT Innovation Lab, which was an amazing opportunity to learn from other innovation leaders, and we learned so much from each other, especially when we when we stopped bragging about how wonderful we were and showing off all our fantastic innovation initiatives. When we shifted from bragging and showing off to sharing our pain and sharing what keeps us up at night and our nightmares and that sort of thing, and our worst mistakes. When we began sharing very honestly, the learning just increased exponentially. And so, next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about bringing consciousness to the process of leading innovation. So the first thing I'd like to touch on briefly is, what is leadership? The ancient Greek word strategos was the word used to describe the ultimate leader, the general, Alexander the Great. And it also described his art. In other words, it described the art of being a general. And that art, of course, now is also a bit of a science. So leadership is still an art, but we have hundreds of years of understanding of what makes good or bad or in between mediocre leaders. And of course, a lot of that's encapsulated in this concept that's expressed by Sun Tzu, that nothing is more difficult than maneuvering for strategic advantage. So in many ways, that's what strategy is all about. If you maneuver for strategic advantage, if you put yourself in a winning position, then you're more likely to win. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of information on this slide, and I'm not going to read all of it to you. But the point is that strategy has structure. And again, the key requirement is to bring a very conscious mindset to the process of developing and implementing strategy. So we've all heard of the concept of strategic planning. That's the first part. But of course, a strategy isn't just a plan, it's also action and implementation. So this slide attempts to capture how I view the structure of strategy and the elements of consciousness that you have to bring to strategy. So starting at the very top is your purpose. If you don't have a purpose, right, you may as well pack it up and go home. If you don't have a specific mission as a leader, if your strategy doesn't have a purpose, then it's pointless. So that's the mission. Next, of course, you need to have a clear vision of what you're trying to accomplish. We've heard terms probably like big, audacious goals and so on. And that's what a vision is all about. It defines the mountain that you want to climb. It defines what winning looks like. And of course, it's not a simple thing. It's not, you can't usually just say there's one goal that is your vision. There's usually one goal at the top, and then there's a whole cluster of goals around that that you have to achieve all of them in order to ultimately achieve that top goal. So again, you've got to bring a very conscious approach to understanding what your vision is. The next realm of strategy is about communication. It's about expressing, articulating what you're doing. If other people don't understand the strategy, they won't be able to help implement it. Also, if other people aren't convinced that it's the right strategy and they're just blindly following it, they're not going to be very good at what they do. You know, the best soldiers are soldiers who are also very conscious and very capable and empowered, not just blind followers. So that realm of communication, and then that extends down into engagement of all stakeholders, all the people involved in implementing the strategy, but also your customers, your investors. And then further, that extends down into the realm of leadership and empowering resources, and then making sure that people really understand what they're supposed to do, and also pick up responsibility and lead themselves. And beneath that, the realm of creativity and R&D. And then at the bottom level, implementation, where of course the rubber meets the road, as some people say, and that's where you see what happens, right? You implement your strategy and you see what happens. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, one key point. Then also, of course, we can talk about high-level long-term strategies, which the things at the top of the pyramid is smaller because it doesn't change as much. And as you go down, of course, there's more change and more complexity, and therefore more detail, and often, yeah, your more detailed plans. So next slide now, please. So on the next slide, the key point is that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? What that means is if you've got the wrong kind of culture, the wrong psychology, the wrong attitudes, the wrong beliefs or motivations within your team or your organization, then even the best planned strategy will fail, guaranteed. Next slide, please. So my thinking and what I'm trying to convey to you here is that to bring a conscious approach to strategy, you really need to effectively bridge between the aspects of strategy on the left and aspects of psychology on the right, which actually, as you can see, line up with the aspects of strategy. So you've got at the psychological level, you've got a person's sense of purpose, what they're passionate about, what they love, what do they really want to do? What's their mission in life? Next, you've got, of course, their aspirations and their goals, their vision for their life. Next, you've got their ability to communicate, their ability to influence, right? Their voice, their ability to courageously and authentically express themselves. Then you've got the heart, right? You've got their ability to be empathic, and you've got their ability to love and be loved and to love themselves. Next, you've got the Power Chakra, right? Where you've got your power as a leader and your ability to empower others. That's, of course, also about focus. That's about deciding what to focus on and so on. And then you've got the realm of creativity and ideas, and then ultimately beneath on the root chakra, you've got actual activity and so on. So those directly connect across to the aspects or the elements of strategy from mission on down to implementation. But these bridging agendas are actually things that they connect the two sides, but not directly as you might think. So if I can show that more easily on the next slide. So these bridging agendas actually in a way, they connect the elements of strategy with those of psychology, but by bridging both uh, both sides, but by connecting actually four things. So if you look at strategic intent here, considering strategy, strategic intent is actually a coin. If you think of it as a coin, it's got two sides. One side is what's the purpose? What's the mission? The other side is what's the vision? What are you trying to achieve, right? So strategic intent embraces both of those things. And therefore, it actually bridges between strategy, mission, and vision on the left over to the psychology, the passionate purpose and the aspirations and goals of an individual, and it bridges those things. So the point is these middle agendas need to actually engage people psychologically in conscious effort to express and achieve strategy, and in this case, strategic intent. But that same thing works all the way down. So beneath strategic intent, you need good intelligence. If you don't have good intelligence, you're going to lose the war, right? No matter what war it is, whether it's a war of dominating an industry or a war against coronavirus or whatever war it is, you need intelligence. You need to be able to see and understand your environment to know what to do in order to win. And beneath that, you've got to be absolutely clear on the value you're trying to bring to the world at a high level, but also all of the values that inform how you're going to do it, values of integrity and honesty and all of those kinds of things. And then beneath that, you've got the realm of relationships and your ability to engage. So you can see that relationships ties together engagement, leadership, which defines who you're going to focus on and how you're going to engage them, empathy and love, and also, of course, focus and power. So all of those things need to come together to have effective relationships. And as you can see, all of these things are interconnected. All of them are interconnected. Then you've got beneath relationships, your in a sense, your change agenda. What transformation are you trying to drive? What are you trying to change? If you're not trying to change anything, of course, you're doing nothing. So all strategies are about change. And then you've got the realm of creativity, and then, of course, results. And results you see is at the top and the bottom because the model is circular. So next slide, we'll show it again in a slightly different way. So I think of this as, in a way, the bridging agendas are like DNA, right? They stick the two sides together. They stick together the soft stuff of psychology and culture with the hard stuff of strategy. And as you can see, I think, again, it's just showing how these things stick together. But ultimately, what's the purpose of having good, strong DNA, good innovation DNA here? It's to create what I call flow, right? Flow is about peak performance. It's about achieving your results. It's about being successful in your strategy. Next slide, please. So what does flow look like in the real world, right? It's peak performance of, for example, athletes. It's joyful life in terms of conscious living. But look at this theoretically. You've got these 7 chakras, right? And if they're all perfectly open, if they're all perfectly designed and the DNA is as strong as possible, if it's perfect, then the result is 1 times 1, right? 7 times is the answer is 1. You've got perfect flow, 100%, right? If you've got total blockage in 1 chakra, it's 0, and as you absolutely see, the end result is 0 flow. Now that's theoretical because nothing is ever perfect and nothing is ever perfectly bad. Next slide, please. So the real world looks more like this, right? Where in an organization, if I look at them, and I've looked at lots of organizations and I've assessed their ability to innovate in this way, and I might give them 80% on one and 70% on something and 90% and 50% and so on. And the typical results, around 0.05. And in fact, if you look at innovation success rates across all industries, and many people have done this, Doblin Group and others, innovation success rates tend to be below 10%. In fact, they range from sort of 1%, 5%, 6, 7%. So innovation is very difficult. Why? Because of the psychology, and because it's difficult to bridge between psychology and strategy and to bring real conscious leadership to the whole process. Now, see what happens if you focus on improvement, and maybe you improve to 0.9 across the board. You can have a 10x improvement. So that's the goal. Next slide, please. So what does this look like in the real world? I'm just using one metaphor here. I could have used airplanes or cars or anything, but use bus. Because we think of, as leaders, we want to get people on our bus and working with us and so on. So what it looks like when you've got blockage in any of the 7 chakras is this: if you lack purpose and drive, right, you're going to crash. If you're got unclear vision and direction, you're going to crash. The screen just changed. Is there a reason for that? Anyway, you can see that if you've got blockage in any of the chakras, you're going to have a problem. Are we okay? Okay, can we go back to the other screen view? Okay, well, let's go to the next slide. So this simply summarizes the 7 sins of innovation, and for every sin, of course, there's a virtue. There's 2 sides to every coin. So the top sin, of course, is having a pointless purpose or no purpose at all. I'd really like to go back to the way I was seeing the main sort of portal view or whatever it was before, which I'm no longer seeing. I'm now, do you know what I mean? Because that way I can see my slides better and I can therefore talk to them better. Is that possible? The corresponding sin, of course, is the sin is to no purpose or pointless purpose. The virtue is, of course, having a very passionate purpose. And you can read all the way down, so you can have real clear vision, or you can be completely blind or have impaired vision. You can have really good communication and expression, or you can have what I call apathetic miscommunication. So we're bad at communicating and we don't care. In level of engagement, you can be very highly engaged or you can be totally disengaged. Level of power, you can have a culture of fear versus a culture of empowered leadership and servant leadership. And then in creativity, you can be amazingly creative or you can be boring and uncreative. And then finally, you can be, really acting very properly, or you can be just completely apathetic and complacent. And I think you can see complacency in many forms. Often it's arrogance. So organizations can be very arrogant. And that turns into complacency. They say, we don't need to worry about this stuff. We're good enough as we are. Next slide, please. So this just shows, in a way, that I'm just relating it to another person's thoughts here, namely Steve Jobs. And his thoughts were published posthumously by Gallo. But again, you can see that that Steve's thoughts on innovation and the so-called innovation secrets pretty much line up with mine. Just change the order a bit. The tornado at the bottom illustrates that it takes a lot of ideas, a lot of little specks of gold dust to ultimately turn into gold bricks. And the way good leaders consciously drive that is by killing good ideas quickly and focusing on the great ideas. So you narrow the tornado as quickly as possible, so you're really laser focused, as opposed to if you've got it like a funnel like that, you're wasting a lot of resource. Next slide, please. So this just again relates it to another realm or another organization's thoughts on innovation. Google has 8 pillars of innovation. As you can see, in my view, 2 of them relate to the same thing. You can read the different expressions, but as you can see, they line up again to my views on conscious strategy and leading. And the little illustration in the bottom left is looking down at the top of the tornado and making the point that there are lots and lots of specific ways of widening the top of that tornado so that you capture as many ideas as possible. Things like looking out at the real world, market research, competitive analysis, a lot of them leading to intelligence. Next slide, please. So this just relates to another set of my thoughts on customer experience, and just shows that, of course, the 7 sins can compromise customer experience, and just as the virtues and building those virtues and building flow can lead to really great customer experience. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend reading 9.5 Things You Do Differently If Disney Ran Your Hospital. I love that book, and it's highly applicable, and I've used it working with healthcare organizations, but I also have used the same thought process and worked with many different kinds of organizations and talked about and looked at 9.5 Things You Do Differently If You Were Disney. It's a good book. Next slide, please. So that'll conclude my remarks. I'm sorry, I can see I ran a little bit over time. I apologize. I hope we still have time for some questions.
Thank you, Dr. Dave. That was really, really wonderful. Yes, we would love to take a couple of questions. We do have a few minutes because we started a couple of minutes late. So I'm going to dive into the questions that I see on the Q&A chat. The first question is, any best practices that you recommend to drive the culture of conscious innovation within an organization or startup ecosystem?
Yeah, really everything I just said. Yes, it's, I mean, a key, if I were to try and summarize probably the top thing is engagement. You need people to be engaged. And of course, we saw recently a global survey done by Gartner, I think it was Gartner Group, that said that globally, less than 30% of workforces are actually engaged. And I think they said the figure in the United States was about 40% on average. I don't recall what they said about India, but I think it was around 30 or maybe lower. The point is that people are often disengaged, and what you need to change that, right? And ultimately, you need to try to engage people, and if you can get engagement up to the 70, 80% level, you're going to massively improve. As a leader, consciously focus on making sure people are engaged. And if you find people who won't engage, say goodbye, and find people who will. And similarly, though, most people will engage, and a lot of it is about making them consciously aware of purpose. I mean, how many employees in organizations really understand the purpose and really feel connected to it? And how many, if I go into organizations, I say, and I just pick on people randomly, and I say, what's the purpose of this organization? Why are you here? What's your purpose here? How are you contributing to the overall purpose? People are often like, not sure, right? They're disengaged. So again, find a way to engage them in every single aspect of conscious strategy.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I think that also answers another question that we had, which was innovation strategies are often faced with internal resistance from the teams. How do you think great companies have been able to manage internal teams to embrace change, to consistently innovate, especially at the bottom of the strategy pyramid, right?
Yeah.
And I think
Well, that's a great question as well. And yeah, resistance is a really interesting phenomenon. So as a leader, you're trying to drive strategic change. You're trying to do that very consciously, and you will find people resist. And often we think of resistance as a bad thing. You want to counter it. You want to get rid of it. You want to stamp it out. I say engage it. Resistance is a good thing. If somebody's resisting, they obviously care. That's good for a start. And the point is, if people are resisting a change, or if they're resisting a direction, it's because they have concerns. It's because maybe they don't understand. Maybe they don't completely understand the intelligence. Maybe they have fear, right? The fear is underlying their resistance. So people need to overcome fear. And one way to overcome fear is to make them more conscious of the good things that are going to happen when we achieve this strategy. And yes, of course, you might be fearful of something. The other key point is, if somebody's fearful of something, it may be because they have sight of a problem, or they understand a potential risk which you need to be aware of, right? So sometimes resistance is because people are more aware of a risk than the leader is. Right? So leaders need to not only speak and direct, they also need to listen and be aware. They need to be conscious in every sense.
Well, that's truly insightful, and thank you for sharing that. We'll take one last question. I think with the current times, I think this is more and more in the forefront for all of us. The question is, what is your take on government's role in building innovation and startup ecosystem in the country?
I'm sorry, Kritika, you cut out a little bit while you were asking.
Okay, so the other question was, in the current times, what is your take on government's role in building innovation and the startup ecosystem in the country?
Well, I think government plays a very important role in terms of enabling ecosystems to fall into place. I personally don't think that, and I also think that governments need to be innovative themselves. Governments need to be far more innovative and bring more conscious innovation into their own strategic thinking and planning about everything, how to counter COVID-19 and get through this crisis, how to lead India to the $5 trillion economy. That's going to take a lot of conscious leadership on the part of the governments and a lot of innovative thinking. But I know your question is more about what should governments do in terms of creating a good ecosystem. I think it's one of enabling. It's like partnering with organizations like NASSCOM, organizations like Pratian Global Innovation, and it's about encouraging investment, encouraging entrepreneurship. It's about, I think governments play a key role in terms of the education system. So it's about looking at the education system, and why isn't the education system teaching consciousness? Why isn't it teaching strategy? Why isn't it teaching important life skills? Why isn't it teaching communication, right? What's all this boring focus on what we thought was relevant 50 years ago when I was a kid, right? I mean, come on, get with the program, get with the modern days, and teach innovation skills. And those are the sorts of things I think the government should be focused on.
Right. Dr. Dave, there are tons of questions that are pouring in, and just to be fair to the audience, I definitely like to take 2 more questions if you don't mind, and I request our panelists for the next to kindly bear with me on this. I just want to be fair to all
Yeah.
of you who've logged in, to answer some of these questions.
Yeah, I apologize for taking so long with my talk
No, that was
but
absolutely wonderful. So Dr.
and
Dave,
I'm fine. I can stay on for as long as you want. I'm absolutely fine. It's very early in the morning here still, so long way ahead. So, yeah.
So Doctor, one question, I'm going to pick a couple of them out of here because there are loads of questions here. One is, how do you eliminate failures in innovation? Vijayan asks us this question on how to eliminate failures in innovation.
Well, I don't think it's about eliminating failures. I think it's about learning from them. So if you're not making any mistakes, you're not trying hard enough. And so we are going to make mistakes. We are going to quote unquote fail. But when we fail, failure can be a good opportunity for success, right? Because failure can be an opportunity to learn. And if you pick up the pieces from failure properly, instead of just trying to eliminate it and sweep it under the carpet or push it out the door, you really, if you fail at any aspect of innovation or any aspect of strategy, you really should do a forensic analysis. You really want to understand exactly why it failed and learn from it.
Right. Okay. The other question is, innovation requires a lot of investment. And typically, if we are talking of AI and ML, then there would be requirement of data as well. For first-time entrepreneurs, how can this be possible? And how do we work around something like this?
Well, I think one way is to find the right ecosystem to work in. So for example, one of the reasons I'm really excited about Pratian Global Innovation and working on that is that it's a fantastic ecosystem to bring in entrepreneurs and they have their particular entrepreneurial focus, but within the ecosystem is a whole massive capability for things like augmented intelligence and cutting edge technology innovation. So the short answer is that if entrepreneurs get connected into an effective ecosystem, then they don't have to do everything from scratch, right? If they get involved in an ecosystem where they've got access to investment, they've got access to leading technology skills, they've got access to talent, they've got access to mentors who have been there and done that and got the T-shirt. So they've got all of those things within a good ecosystem, and therefore they don't need to reinvent the wheel, 80 times.
Right, right. No, we can just go on, Dr. Dave. I think I have the perfect last question to, don't like to end this conversation, but yeah, we will have to at some point. So I'll end this thing with one last question from one of our participants, which says, do you have any suggestions or any models for the Indian context?
Yeah, I think, well, personally, I think the model I showed you, I hope people can resonate with the concept of chakras. I, of course, stole that from India. Stole that from Ayurveda. I've stolen ideas shamelessly, of course. There's not a single new idea in my book. It's really just a synthesis of everybody else's great ideas. But I think the other thing I would say is, and this comes back perhaps and relates to government, but it's a challenge for all Indian leaders to bring greater consciousness. I think India as a culture globally is ideally placed to be a major leader in conscious digital innovation. As you know, NASSCOM's mission, of course, is when you think digital, you want to think India, right? And that's great. But I think there's another spin on it, which is that Indian culture, I think, in the global context, if you look at Indian culture compared to Chinese, American, British, everything else. India, I think, is a culture that's more naturally predisposed toward consciousness. Okay, so things like, I'm not saying other people don't meditate. I've been meditating since 1970, but I was meditating, having learned to meditate based on Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, right? Transcendental meditation. And since then, of course, I've also incorporated practices from others, mostly Indian, right? And so India, I think, has a global role to play in terms of bringing greater consciousness to the planet Earth, to humanity of all cultures. And I think the other nice thing about Indian culture is I think Indian culture is very inclusive, right? I don't think I've ever met anyone, or if I did, they hid it very well. I don't think I've ever met anyone from India who was, say, a racist toward me or looked down on me, right? I think that Indians are naturally people who embrace other people and other cultures, and even the, you know, the way you look at you know, Hinduism, that's an amalgamation of many different beliefs and thought systems, and it resulted because Indians are very tolerant of other people having slightly different views about, you know, their God or their or what's important and so on. So I think India is ideally placed to bring greater consciousness to the world, and that's why I think conscious digital innovation is something that can really be led by India, with a little help from its friends like me and others. You know,
Right.
you can have a lot of friends help you in that journey.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Dave. This has been absolutely wonderful, and we've been absolutely privileged, and I can't really thank you enough. And we will continue our conversations going forward, and we will find multiple opportunities, you know, consenting from your end to come and speak to our audiences in different ways. And we will look forward to building this relationship further and growing the whole innovation index in India. Thank you so much, Dr. Dave, and an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.